Trade union COSATU is calling for the decriminalisation and regulation of independent small-scale mining. The call comes as several illegal miners remain trapped underground at a disused mine in Langlaagte, south of Johannesburg. Well, COSATU has expressed concern at the escalating deaths of those illegal miners, generally also known as Zama Zamas. It's called on government and the mining sector to immediately address this. There are approximately 140,000 Zama Zamas operating in a billion-rand industry. Hundreds have lost their lives in the trade, described as the vulture that feeds off the carcass of South Africa's mining industry. Well, Christopher Rutledge of the human rights group ActionAid has been tracking, researching and debating trends in the illegal mining industry in South Africa. He joins me now. Christopher, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Devon.
Once again, we speak under such tragic circumstances in search of a solution. I mean, you've held conferences, you've held workshops on this illegal mining trade. Firstly, perhaps let's get straight into it. How would regulating this industry help in curbing deaths?
Yes, that's often the question we get asked. We did a presentation to the board of the Department of Mineral Resources just a week or two ago, and the same question was asked. And essentially, we're saying, for us, it's not a question of how are we going to regulate it. It's a question of urgently regulating it as soon as possible, because essentially we're dealing with people and lives, and more than that, we're dealing with a socio-economic problem which is not going to go away. The African Union has admitted it, the Chamber of Mines, COSATU now I'm very glad to see has come on board. So it's really a question about how soon can we get to regulating this? You know, for me it's a question, it's how far is a piece of string? We need to do this. It's not a question of is it possible? Of course it's possible. We've regulated much more complicated pieces of legislation. This needs to be regulated. It's a question of life and death, as we now can see.
I want to understand the barriers, because when you look at just the numbers alone, the number of people involved in the activity, the size of this, let's call it economy of this industry, I would think it's compelling enough to install or inject that urgency. What are the barriers?
Absolutely, it is a compelling case, and this is something that the world generally is starting to realize. The International Labour Organization, the United Nations, the African Union, the Chamber of Mines, the International Council of Mining, of Minerals and Metals have all recognized that this is not a problem that's going to go away. It is estimated that up to 20% of gold from the African continent comes out of informal mining sectors. And we are quite clear that economically this makes absolute sense, because we're sitting with one of the key questions about how do you generate employment, how do you get the economy going, is to do this organically. And we know that we have hundreds of thousands of miners who have been laid off in the industry. So there's a stock of skill that we have, and we're not utilizing the skill. We've got the resources, it's under the ground. We've got 6,000 open and derelict mines which need to be dealt with. So all of the catalysts are there, all of the pieces of the puzzle are there. I think what we lack is the political will. I heard Minister Zwane's interview with your reporter earlier, and again, I think that the Department of Mineral Resources needs to really come to the party, and they need to be held to account, because often they get asked these questions and they say, no, we're going to deal with the problem. But the idea of dealing with the problem is arresting people. That is no solution to poverty, it's no solution to unemployment, it's no solution to the works crisis that we have.
We also have, if I can interject, the spotlight once again shining on the responsibility, which is what you were alluding to here. The companies abandoning their mines. Is there clear policy on what could be done with that section?
Yes, there is a clear policy. There is a fund which government manages and which they have been trying to deal with. So we know that the Council for Geological Sciences and Mintech, both institutions linked to government, have been doing research around the 6,000 odd abandoned and derelict mines across the country. And what we're hearing from these institutions, certainly from the Council for Geosciences, is that as soon as they're going in to close the mines, the Zama Zamas come back in, or they come to the derelict mine and they're already there, and then there's this tense conflict that erupts between people who are trying to do some very good and important research and what is termed as illegal miners. And we're saying that government, if government comes on board, that we use these institutions of knowledge to help us overcome this problem, instead of putting all the resources of the state against people who are really just hungry. It doesn't make sense to us.
I want to understand how to read the component of foreigners being involved in Zama Zamas in here, in South Africa, and involved in illegal mining. How do we digest that stat productively?
Well, firstly, let me say that I think it's a false. We come from a false premises if we want to distinguish between illegal miners being foreign or local. Over the 150 odd years of mining in South Africa, we've always drawn on our neighboring countries for cheap labor. And so when it comes to this problem, we need to take the responsibility and say that this is not a South African problem, it's a regional problem. And so we cannot be making these distinctions between somebody from Lesotho or somebody from Zimbabwe and somebody in South Africa. These miners have all been employed and retrenched in this economy. So we need to be dealing with that problem. Furthermore, I think that the statistics which the government and many people are relying on about how many of the miners are illegal from foreign countries is based on arrest records. Now we know that there's a whole set of collusions that happen around arrests. And so quite obviously what's happening is that people who are illegal are much easier to arrest than somebody who is from South Africa. So if you're basing the quantity only on arrest records, then I think we're making a statistical mistake by doing that. And from what we've known, we've been working with Zama Zama miners, and what we're seeing is that these are ordinary South African people who are hungry and are desperate to earn a living.
Christopher Rutledge, that's all we have time for from ActionAid.
Thanks
very much indeed for coming in.
You're welcome.